Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome. So this is part one of conflict resolution. This is getting your needs met. And I'm just going to start, and then as people arrive, they'll just be able to come on in. So that won't cause us any disruption. But a little bit of housekeeping, if you could pop yourselves on mute, and you can put questions or comments in the chat, and then I can just have a look at those. And you can have your cameras on. It's nice if you can put your cameras on, then we can see you, and that'll help me. I can see your reactions as I'm talking. So that'll be lovely. So this is part one of conflict resolution. So in an ideal world, we actually want to prevent conflict, but we don't want to avoid conflict, because quite often that just means we're not going to be getting our needs met at all. So it's really about how to get your needs met, and you absolutely can. You do not compromise on that, but we'll come to that later. So how to get your needs met and how to navigate conflict without it feeling uncomfortable. Because when we say conflict, we tend to think of that as something uncomfortable. So this is how to navigate it comfortably and getting your needs met without having to compromise. Particularly good in relationships, but you can use this in any situation. Now, the first thing we have to remember is we need to stick to the facts of what has happened. And so what we do is we look at it and we give the facts, when we don't give judgments or opinions, because everybody looks at life differently. We've all got our own lens. And so we can put our slant on it that way. So what we need to do is we need to sort of pare it right back to the absolute facts. So the very, very first thing you do is look at the facts of the situation. And you don't connect or link them like, oh, you did that, that made me angry. So we sort of go like, okay, this happened, fact. And then what happened? I got angry, fact. So no linking. So there's no because. It's not then, because then you don't have someone's fault. And then it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that because that made me angry. So we don't have any of that. We just stick to the facts. This happened, this happened. Okay, so the next thing you have to do is consider, so it takes a little bit of practice this, but you need to consider what was your need in this situation that happened. You don't have to tell them this. In fact, the other person doesn't need to know any of this. What we're doing here, this conflict resolution, is based on NVC, and they don't need to know this process. This is just for you to know. If they do, obviously that's really good actually and really helpful, because it's much easier to work it out. But don't worry if the other person doesn't know NVC. So the first thing you need to do is you're going to look at what actually happened, and you're going to consider what your needs were. Okay, well, you had a need that every behavior, everything we do, there is a need behind it. And so we're going to find your need. And what we can do is we can actually bring that down to a core need. There's 6 core needs. You'll find those on my website. And also on the website, when you're looking for your need, because it's hard at first, because it has to be a real need. So again, there's a list on my website, which is really, really helpful. So look at the situation that happened and work out what your need was, not what you pretend it to be. So in a situation like your partner needed you to take the rubbish out, that's not a need. What was the real need behind it? And what we're talking about here is emotional needs. And then say with the rubbish situation, you think, well, why was I so annoyed that you didn't take the rubbish out? And you can think, what was my need? Maybe I had a need for certainty or for security. So you bring it down through the level of the needs, right down to the core need, the real need. And that's what you need to do for yourself in the situation that happened. Work out what your need was. And you'll get better at this as you practice it over time. And then the next step The next step is working out what the other person's need might be. And you can guess this. You don't even have to get it right. So you must start to think now, well, I wonder what their need was. Like, why would someone be so annoyed that you didn't take the rubbish out? I wonder why. I wonder what annoyed them so much. What was their need? And then you can start to think about what their need was. Then the next step, and this is really, really important, and this actually is the pivotal point, I think, is then you start to feel and show empathy for that person. So you work out what their need is. And when you see what their need is, then you can start to have some empathy. So the situation that someone's just put in the chat is that the guy upstairs gets really, really annoyed because she's got a really loud laugh. This is at university in the offices. And he gets really annoyed and he doesn't really express himself very well, but he just gets annoyed with her laugh. So we might think, okay, well, it might be obviously that something triggers him about it, and that does make things harder. But let's assume this is simple. Let's assume it's not a trigger. And let's start to think, well, what's his need? What might his need be? Like maybe, for example, he's concentrating really hard. Maybe he's like a mathematician and he's really focusing and his brain's really engaged and he's just about to solve the equation. And then the laugh, he's not very good at shutting out outside sounds, and the laugh comes and it distracts him. He's been working on this for an hour. It could be anything, but we work out, well, what was his need? So his need was to really concentrate and focus. His need was for silence, so he could do that. And then we can show some empathy for that need. Imagine what it's like when you're really engrossed and you're concentrating and you get distracted by this sudden sound and you couldn't shut it out. So you can then guess their need and then you can show empathy or feel empathy for them. And that's really important. Okay, feel empathy and guessing what their need might be. And then when you communicate with them, assuming that this is someone you are still communicating with, we'll just put in here, obviously, if the person doesn't actually want to have a relationship with you, be it the friendship or colleague, then that's a whole different situation. This is for someone who actually is trying to work with you. But so assuming this person does, and then in this situation, the university one, he had a go at her. And so a person could throw judgments at you, they can throw abuse at you, anything, but you then have some empathy because you're understanding what their need was. So you can then go, oh, sorry, were you needing, and we'll come on to that later. This is only part one about your needs. We'll come on later as to how you communicate your need. But you start to think and you'd be able to suggest to them, oh, you were needing to concentrate. And when we do come onto this, you might say something like, oh, I see. So I'm really sorry, were you needing to concentrate? And it doesn't matter if you don't guess it right. Okay. So they might go, no, it wasn't that. It's just that I couldn't hear my daughter. My daughter's on the phone and she's having a breakdown. So you can use it as an entry to start to guess what's going on for them. So you just start to guess their need and they may clarify it with you. All right, so now what we've got is we've got your need and we've got their need or their guest need. Okay, now at no point do we compromise on these needs. Okay, and you've got your need, you can get it right down to your core need because you know what it is. This will take you practice to work this out. Your need and you got their need, and there is no negotiating on that, okay? And again, check my website to help you with the needs. There's lists of real needs on there. All right, so what happens is we have two people's needs, and then to get your need met, there is what's called a strategy. That's it, that's the behaviors. So we don't negotiate on the needs, it's the strategy we're going to negotiate on. So, for example, in the situation that someone had about throwing the rubbish out, your strategy might be that the person puts the rubbish out at a certain time. That's the strategy. That's not actually the need behind it. And then the other person's strategy was, well, I'll put it out when I want. one person wants it out now, the other one says, well, I'll the strategy is I'll get it put out before it needs to be done. So we've got your need and we've got their need. And then we've got two different strategies. And this is the level that we negotiate at, not the need level. So now we're going to, or not now, because this is just the intro session, but what we would do was negotiate on the strategy, because they are not matching up. And that's where the whole negotiation starts. Here's your needs, here's your strategies. This is the level that we're going to negotiate on. I hope that's making sense so far. So this is just the first part, and I want you to focus here on needs. Start practicing working out what your needs are. And I think that once you start to learn a little bit more about what your needs are, every behavior and thought and conversation you have, once you start to learn that, I think you'll find it easier to start to guess what other people's needs are. Obviously, sometimes in life, we do quite well negotiating at the strategy level. So sometimes it does work and you don't need to get to needs. But I'm helping you here with harder situations where there's more conflict or perhaps ongoing conflict. So just to recap, you need to find your need. You need to guess their need. And then it's going to be the strategy that we negotiate on. And you can guess their need, you don't have to get it right. And the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get. So the next step will be, in the next part, how you convey your needs to others. And there's helpful phrases, again, on my website, helpful phrases of how you can do that. And the next step after that is how you make the request to have that need met. And that's actually very different from a demand. So a demand might be like, oh, I need you to take the rubbish out today. And a request is phrased really differently. So you're not going to antagonize the other person, but remember, you don't negotiate on your need. So it's all about communication, how you communicate your needs. And I just think this is just wonderful. It works really, really well. In fact, I had a client who has been a people pleaser all his life, and every relationship has fallen apart because he's not getting his needs met. And every time he would ask to get his needs met, it would just get all emotional, everybody would be shouting, and all his relationships have broken up because of it. And he started this, and within 4 weeks, he had it sorted. So we're talking, a lifetime of not, and this is the same, not just with his partners, with his mum and everybody. And in 4 weeks, he had it sorted. So it's a way of communicating, and it's how you communicate your needs. Takes practice, but it's really, really good. And it takes practice to make it sound natural as well. So one other thing is, we're not going to discuss this when, like, people in a real state, when they're in an emotional state. Okay, wait till they're a bit calmer, and then you can address it. If you're calm, you can do it. But if someone's got really wound up, that's, like having a tantrum. It's not always say that. Never try and have a logical discussion with a tantrum. It's just not the right time. And you might want to start just guessing their needs, and that's not. It can be really, really hard if they don't want to communicate. So yeah. So we're going to start step by step. And this is the first step, and then we'll slowly move on to the next step. And are there any other questions about that? Yeah, like with triggers makes it a lot harder. So we'll come on to triggers later. I think it's really good if you just start by getting the basic idea of this. Let's start with it in its simplest form, and then we can come on to triggers later. Yeah, look, it again, similar to triggers, if someone's not actually communicating at all with you, that's quite different. So again, I think we'll start with the very basic. Like I said earlier, you're communicating with someone who also actually would like to have the relationship, and I don't mean necessarily romantic relationship, but whatever relationship it is, let's assume that they do actually want it to continue. Yeah. All right, so that's the end of the first stage. So the aim now is to go and practice that, practice working out what your needs are and guessing what the other person's needs are. Okay.